In the bitter final weeks of World War II, chaos reigned over Eastern Europe. The rumble of tanks, the cries of the displaced, and the smoke of burning cities were the soundtrack of survival. Among the throngs of evacuees trudging through the frozen roads of southern Poland in January 1945, two boys clung to each other's hands with silent desperation. Jakub and Eli Lewin, aged 10 and 6, were brothers, sons of a Polish Jewish tailor from Krakow. They had been hiding with their mother in a crumbling church basement after their father was taken away by the Gestapo 2 years earlier. Their mother had succumbed to typhus just weeks before the evacuation. Alone, terrified, and without identification, the boys were herded onto a military truck among dozens of other war orphans, bound for an uncertain future in Germany. As the convoy crossed into Bavaria, Allied aircraft began bombing the retreating Axis forces. Panic broke out. In the confusion, Jakub was yanked away from Eli by a frantic nurse trying to shield the children. The truck carrying Jakub was rerouted toward Nuremberg. Eli was left behind, screaming his brother's name into the sky as the engines roared. Away. Jakub never saw his brother again. In Nuremberg, a Protestant chaplain with the U.S. Army, Reverend Charles Whitaker, had volunteered to assist with war orphans. He found Jakub standing barefoot in the cold, shivering, still clutching the frayed edge of his mother's prayer shawl. Moved by the boy's haunted silence, Reverend Whitaker arranged for Jakub to be evacuated to the United States under the Displaced Persons Act. He gave him a new name, David Whitaker, and raised him as his own son in Cincinnati, Ohio. David grew up in a quiet Midwestern home, never speaking of Poland, or the war, or the ghost of a younger brother whose name he could barely remember. Reverend Whitaker, though kind, believed in starting anew. The past is too heavy to carry forever, he would say gently. But at night, Jakub, now David, would dream of a little hand slipping from his grasp in the snow. By the time Jakub Lewin turned 18, as David Whitaker, he had mastered the art of being American. In Cincinnati, he went to church every Sunday with Reverend Whitaker and his wife, Eleanor. He played baseball in the alley behind their house, spoke English without an accent, and excelled in math and science. His Polish roots had faded into distant memories, blurred images of breadlines, whispered prayers in Yiddish, and the rough wool of his mother's coat wrapped around him in the basement of that church. The Whitakers never lied to him. They told him he had come from the war, from another country, but they never pressed for details, and he never offered any. David felt a quiet, gnawing guilt every time he laughed at the dinner table or opened a Christmas gift. A part of him whispered that somewhere his brother might still be out there, alone. Still, life moved forward. David went to college on a scholarship, studied engineering, and built a promising career. In 1957, he married a librarian named Clara, and together they settled into a modest home in Dayton. They had 2 children, Michael and Susan, and from the outside their lives appeared idyllic, stable, respectable, American. But David carried an ache that time never erased. On his nightstand, hidden beneath a drawer liner, was the only item that remained from his past. A creased black and white photo of 2 boys, he and Eli, standing beside their mother in Krakow, the day before everything changed. Their faces were smudged with dirt, but their eyes were full of light. David often stared at that photo in the quiet hours before dawn, wondering if Eli had survived, wondering if he remembered him. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, in a children's home outside of Munich, a boy named Eli Lewin was growing up with his own questions. After being left behind during the bombing, Eli was placed in a German Jewish orphanage under the care of a Red Cross team. A volunteer nurse named Greta Adler took a special interest in him, often sneaking him extra rations and teaching him how to write. She helped him fill out official forms and records, listing his name, his date of birth, and the name of his only known relative, Jakub Lewin. The years passed, and Eli stayed in Germany, eventually adopted by a kind but reclusive violin maker named Heinrich Vogel. Though he kept the name Lewin, he often wondered if it meant anything anymore. By the time he turned 30, he had built a quiet life as a music teacher in Salzburg, Austria. Yet he never stopped placing notices in international refugee databases, writing to Red Cross offices, and scanning any list of survivors that mentioned Krakow 1945. Neither brother knew how close they'd come to finding each other. In 1963, Eli's letter to a displaced persons archive in New York was filed but never answered. In 1971, David had once typed his birth name into a veterans database while helping his son with a history project, but gave up when no match was found. They were like two stars orbiting in the same galaxy, never colliding, always missing by inches. But that was about to change. In the summer of 1985, Susan Whitaker was cleaning out her late grandmother Eleanor's attic in Cincinnati. Boxes of yellowed newspapers, faded family albums, and forgotten trinkets cluttered the dusty space. As she lifted an old, worn leather satchel, something caught her eye, a framed photograph tucked carefully beneath some fabric. Curious, Susan pulled it out. The photo was black and white, and the edges were frayed. It showed two boys standing side by side, arms around each other's shoulders. The boys looked solemn yet brave, eyes fixed on the camera. Beneath the photo, written in elegant script, were the words, Jakob and Eli Lewin, Krakow, 1945. Susan's breath caught. The names were foreign, but there was something hauntingly familiar about the faces. She recognized the man on the right immediately. It was her father, David, but much younger, with darker hair and a softer expression. She showed the photograph to her mother, Clara, who paled. "Where did you find this?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "In Grandma's attic," Susan replied. "I think it belonged to her and Grandpa." David was called home from his engineering firm, his hands shaking as he held the picture. For the first time in decades, the past came rushing back, the day he and Eli were separated, the horrors of war, and the family he had thought lost forever. Eleanor Whitaker had kept the photograph a secret for all those years. She was Jakob's foster mother, who had taken him in after the war, hiding the truth about his brother's fate from everyone, including Jakob himself. She had hoped the trauma would fade, that the boys would forget and build new lives. But deep down, Eleanor had never stopped searching for Eli. The photograph ignited a spark of hope. David and Clara decided to begin a search for Eli Lewin. They contacted organizations specializing in displaced persons and Holocaust survivors, sending copies of the photo and personal details across the globe. Meanwhile, Eli was living quietly in Salzburg, teaching music and raising a small family, when a letter arrived from an American agency showing the photograph of him and his brother. His hands trembled. For years, he had wondered if his brother had survived, but the confirmation was overwhelming. The two brothers, separated by war, borders, and decades, were finally on the verge of reunion. After weeks of anxious waiting and countless phone calls, David and Clara finally received a response from the International Tracing Service in Bad Arolsen, Germany. The agency specialized in helping families separated during World War II, and they had uncovered a promising lead. Eli Lewin, now living under a slightly different spelling of his name, Elias Levin, had registered as a refugee in Austria. After the war, he had attended a displaced persons camp near Salzburg and later resettled in the area, dedicating his life to music. The letter detailed Elias's marriage to a woman named Anna, his two children, and his work as a piano teacher. The document even included an old passport photograph of Elias, older but unmistakably the boy from the photograph. David and Clara were overwhelmed with mixed emotions: joy at finally learning the truth, fear of rejection after so many years apart, and hope for a reunion that could heal the wounds of the past. Determined to reunite with his brother, David began writing letters to Elias, explaining who he was and sharing memories of their childhood in Krakow before the war tore their family apart. In Salzburg, Elias read David's letters repeatedly. The words stirred a flood of memories: the narrow streets of their hometown, their mother's warm embrace, the sudden chaos of evacuation, and the crushing loneliness that followed their separation. Elias's wife, Anna, supported his decision to respond, understanding the deep need to connect with a lost brother. They reached out to the American family, arranging a meeting that would change all their lives. David booked a flight to Austria, his heart pounding with anticipation. Clara and Susan prepared carefully, knowing this reunion was as much about healing old scars as it was about rediscovering family. The day of the meeting arrived with a mix of nervous excitement and cautious optimism. At a quiet cafe in Salzburg, two brothers, now men shaped by decades of separation and survival, finally met face to face. David recognized Elias immediately, and the years melted away in their shared gaze. They embraced tightly, tears streaming down their faces, the pain of loss, the burden of uncertainty, and the sorrow of time lost all poured out in that single moment. Over the following days, they shared stories of childhood, survival, resilience, and hope. They discovered both similarities and differences, realizing how their lives had diverged, but also how deeply their bond endured. The reunion was not only a chance to reconnect, but also a reminder of the human spirit's strength, how family, even when fractured by the horrors of war, can find its way back. David and Elias vowed to never lose touch again. Plans were made for Elias and his family to visit the United States, where David would introduce his brother to a new generation of family who had long awaited his return. As they parted, the promise of a new chapter filled their hearts with hope and healing. The photograph found in an attic so many years ago had not only revealed a truth, but had brought two brothers back to each other, proving that even in the darkest times, love can endure and triumph. The days following their reunion were filled with both joy and the quiet work of rebuilding a relationship long paused by fate. David and Elias spent hours talking, laughing, and sometimes sitting in reflective silence, absorbing the weight of years lost. Elias invited David and his family to visit his home in Salzburg, a modest but warm apartment nestled beneath the Alps. Anna, Elias's wife, welcomed them with open arms, and their children, Stefan and Lena, were curious yet eager to meet their uncle and cousins from across the ocean. For David, seeing his brother's life unfold was both a revelation and a comfort. Elias had pursued his passion for music, teaching piano to local children, nurturing talent despite the shadows cast by the past. His home was filled with instruments, old family photographs, and books that chronicled a life lived with resilience. David shared stories of the family in America, their traditions, holidays, and how they kept the memory of their lost relatives alive. They spoke of their mother, Miriam, and the hope she must have held that one day her sons would find each other again. One afternoon, Elias led David to a small room in the back of the apartment, where a modest piano stood bathed in sunlight. He played a haunting melody, a tune Elias had composed himself, inspired by the pain and hope of their shared past. The music spoke of loss, but also of the possibility of new beginnings. The family toured Salzburg together, visiting the old city center, the majestic fortress overlooking the town, and the peaceful banks of the Salzach River. David and Elias marveled at how their lives had taken such different paths, yet the essence of their bond remained intact. Despite the joy, there were moments of pain. Conversations inevitably returned to the war, the chaos of their evacuation, and the years of uncertainty. Elias recounted the harrowing journey he had taken, the nights spent hiding from danger, and the struggle to survive as a young boy, alone in a foreign land. David listened intently, offering comfort and understanding. He shared his own memories, the years spent searching, the unanswered questions, and the hope that never truly faded. Their children played together, bridging cultures and generations, a living testament to the healing power of family reunited. Language barriers were overcome with laughter, games, and shared meals filled with flavors from both sides of the ocean. David and Elias knew that the road ahead would require patience and effort. They planned regular calls, visits, and exchanged letters filled with stories and photographs. The decades apart could never be erased, but they could build new memories, rooted in love and understanding, in quiet moments. David reflected on how fragile life can be, and how even the deepest wounds can begin to heal with time and connection. The photograph found in an attic, the letters sent and received, and the courage to reach out had transformed a family torn apart into one that could dream of a future together. As they prepared for David's return to America, promises were made to cherish this second chance, to never let distance sever their bond again, and to honor the memory of those who had been lost. The reunion was more than a personal victory. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring strength of family. The days after the reunion were a mix of celebration and quiet reflection. As David prepared for his eventual return to America, both brothers found themselves wrestling with emotions long buried beneath years of separation and loss. One evening, Elias invited David to walk through the streets of Salzburg, under the soft glow of street lamps and a sky dusted with stars. The city, with its cobblestone alleys and Baroque architecture, seemed timeless, a stark contrast to the years of upheaval that had shaped their lives. They stopped by a small tucked-away cafe where Elias had often sought solace during difficult times. Over steaming cups of coffee, Elias opened up about his lingering fears and the memories that haunted him. "The war took so much from us," Elias said quietly. "Not just our family, but our innocence, our trust. It's not easy to forget." David nodded, feeling the weight of those words. "I carry those scars too. The waiting, the wondering, the silence. But now that we're together, maybe we can begin to heal." Their conversation drifted to their parents, Miriam and Jack, and the sacrifices they had made to keep hope alive. Elias spoke of his mother's bravery, the strength she showed in protecting him when everything around them was falling apart. David shared how he had clung to stories of his brother, stories whispered in family gatherings, letters that arrived sporadically, and a photograph that had become a cherished relic of their shared past. Despite the years apart, their shared history was a bridge connecting them. Even as the wounds of separation sometimes resurfaced, the brothers agreed to visit the places that had marked their childhood: the old family home in Warsaw, the church where they had been baptized, the small park where they once played. These visits would be painful but necessary, steps toward reclaiming the fragments of their lost youth. Back at Elias's apartment, David noticed a collection of letters and photographs carefully stored in an old wooden box. They had been passed down from Miriam, containing stories, hopes, and regrets, a tangible link to the family they had lost and now found. That as they pored over the faded pages, a sense of connection deepened. The letters spoke of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bond between brothers, no matter the distance or the years. But with healing came challenges. Both men had built lives shaped by the absence of the other. David had a family and a career. Elias had roots in Salzburg. Reconciling these realities meant difficult conversations about visits, communication, and the future. Still, they were determined to nurture their renewed bond. Technology bridged the gap when physical distance was too great. Long phone calls, letters, and shared photos became lifelines. One afternoon, Elias surprised David with a visit to a local museum dedicated to the history of World War II and the Warsaw Uprising. Walking through exhibits that chronicled the bravery and suffering of their homeland, the brothers felt a profound mix of pride and sorrow. They lingered in front of a display that featured a photograph of a young boy clutching a worn teddy bear, a reminder of the countless children affected by the war. Elias's voice trembled as he whispered, "So many stories like ours, waiting to be told." David squeezed his brother's shoulder. "And now we have a chance to tell ours, to honor those who didn't make it, to build a legacy of hope." The evening ended with a quiet walk along the Salzach River, the water reflecting the city lights like stars falling to earth. The brothers spoke little, content to share the silence, knowing that their journey was far from over, but that they would face it together. The reunion between David and Elias was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, challenges, and the promise of rebuilding what war had tried to destroy. In the weeks that followed, the brothers worked tirelessly to bridge the gap created by 4 decades of separation. They shared stories, photographs, and memories, discovering the threads that still connected their lives despite the years apart. David introduced Elias to his wife and children through video calls, the faces on the screen offering warmth and a sense of belonging that had long been missing. Elias, in turn, invited David to Salzburg to meet old friends and neighbors who had become like family during the years they were apart. The brothers planned trips to Warsaw together, walking the streets their parents had once known, visiting the small park where they had played as boys. Each step was a step toward healing, a reclaiming of their shared heritage. But the process wasn't without its difficulties. Both men had changed, shaped by different cultures and experiences. Sometimes, misunderstandings arose, a word taken the wrong way, a hesitation in conversation, reminders that rebuilding a relationship after decades apart required patience and grace. Despite these hurdles, David and Elias remained committed to one another. They knew that their bond was a rare gift, one that transcended time and hardship. Their parents' stories, preserved in letters and photographs, became a foundation for their renewed connection. Miriam's bravery and Jacob's determination inspired them to face the future with courage. Together, they decided to document their story, a tribute to resilience, family, and the enduring power of love. They began writing letters to relatives, reaching out to distant cousins and friends who might hold pieces of their shared past. The journey to reunite a family fractured by war had brought David and Elias together, but it also reminded them of the countless others still searching for closure, for answers, for hope. As they stood on a hill overlooking the city one crisp autumn evening, David turned to Elias and said, "We've been given a second chance. Let's make the most of it." Elias smiled, his eyes reflecting the golden sunset. "Together, we'll build a future that honors the past." And so, with hearts full of gratitude and determination, the brothers stepped forward into the promise of new beginnings, carrying with them the lessons of history and the hope of a better tomorrow. Years have passed since David and Elias were finally reunited to brothers torn apart by war, now united by fate and unwavering love. Their story is a testament to the strength of family bonds, the resilience of the human spirit, and the hope that even in the darkest times, light can be found. Through their journey, they have honored the memories of their parents, rebuilt lost connections, and created new memories filled with laughter, forgiveness, and understanding. Their reunion reminds us all that no matter how long the wait, the ties that truly matter never break. If you were moved by David and Elias's story, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or similar stories of reunion and hope. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more incredible true stories that inspire and touch the heart. Together, we keep these memories alive.